My name's Judd Hendricks, and I'm with Interfaith Paths to Peace, and I want to welcome you to our Monday Soul of the City time. But more specifically, once a month we do a program with Doug Van Houten on nature-based soul work for personal and planetary transformation. And this has been a really great series that Doug's been doing with us, and we're into our fourth week together. And so without further ado, well, actually, there are a little bit of announcements. If you're joining us on Facebook, feel free to add comments or thoughts in the Facebook chat box, and we'll be sure to bring those into the conversation. And if you're joining us on Zoom, there'll be a chance for you to engage as well. So, Doug, I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing, not only here, but around the world. In fact, we have a participant from Bulgaria on today. So this is an international call. Doug is widely known around the world. So he attracts people from all over the world to come and join us. So we want to welcome them as well. Doug, thanks again for doing all the great work you're doing, and we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Judd. I appreciate it. Thank all of you all for coming. And I appreciate some faces I've seen several times at these gatherings, and then some new ones here. So thank you for being here. I'm really honored that you take the time to do this. Thank you. So welcome. I guess, should I just say a little bit about myself, Judd, because we might have some new folks.
Please do, yes.
Yeah, I introduce myself as a nature-based guide to self-healing and holing and soul work, which is a little bit of, you could say, of eco-psychology, a little bit of depth psychology, a whole lot of soul poetry, and a lot of earth wisdom. And in all of my work, the operative word here is it's nature-based. And so work with models that are based in nature, created by a fellow named Bill Plotkin. I guide programs at Animas Valley Institute, which is a nonprofit in Durango, Colorado. And we take people out into wild places or on the edges of wild places to do, you could say, just really deep heart work, really deep existential work, really deep inner psyche work, and learning how to cultivate our natural wholeness that nature endowed us with. Helping to delve into our sub-personalities, which is what we're going to talk about today, which is the wounded, fragmented parts of us, or less mature parts of us. But the bigger piece that we do is what we call help people to have soul encounter, and the kind of encounter with your own deep inner wisdom, really. Like, what does my own depths tell me about life and about what's worthwhile doing? And who am I at the core? What is the essence of me? And so I take people on a journey, invite people on a journey, a kind of a descent to distill back down to your essence, right? And to find the core of what you're about, what the soul, the real architect of your life is inviting for you in this world, and techniques to listen to that, you could say, and taking people again out onto earth, where the ego cannot defend itself from those kinds of conversations, right? Everything out there is doing what, mystery, God, whoever put it there, right? And you're vulnerable when you're in nature. So that's kind of it. I do one-on-one mentoring with people, live out on a farm in Goshen, Kentucky, and people come out here and do soul work and healing and holding work and wander the land. I give folks tasks and invitations to do on the land. Probably more, I could say. You'll kind of figure out what I do if you'll stick around for this call. But that's me pretty much in a nutshell. Anything, Judd, you want to interject here, or
No,
with
just
that?
a deep bow to this really important work, and we can talk more about Plotkins and some of that work as we go if that comes up. But no, thanks, welcome.
Mhm. Excellent. Okay, cool. Well, so we're going to talk about the subpersonalities. This is a model, and maybe Judd, you want to show that this is a model Bill cultivated called the nature-based map of the human psyche. And it's based in nature. This is revelatory to base in nature, right? And so this model here that Judd's showing you, this is the intrapersonal view of the self and the subpersonalities. And so in a previous episode or session, we talked about how to cultivate the facets of wholeness, the nurturing generative adult, the innocent sage fool trickster, the wild indigenous one, the muse, the inner beloved, guides to soul. Yeah, and notice how they're all on the north, south, east, and west in the center there. So the north is the nurturing generative, the east is the innocent sage, fool, etc. And then on the inside of the circle, this is what we're going to talk about today. These are the substitutes for our wholeness, the sub-personalities, or again, what I just said, the substitutes for our wholeness. These fragmented parts step in as our wholeness until we have our wholeness on board, you could say. But before we go any further with this, I want to just read a poem here by Rumi. And you all are going to know this. Most of you are going to know this. This is The Guest House. And maybe if you've heard this, maybe you've heard it a dozen times. Just listen with new ears. This guest house, this being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He, she may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. And I love Rumi's counsel here. Invite whatever shows up, because there's a part of us often that wants to get rid of these parts that are messy or that they may hurt, right? Or that are uncomfortable. But he's saying, no, be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. And they are. The subpersonalities, and we'll talk more about this later, are initiatory. They're initiatory because they invite us to ask deeper questions that pierce behind the veil of our everyday life. They pierce through. Leonard Cohen said, where the cracks are, that's how the light gets in, right? So again, yeah, so here's the overall model. And so we're going to start talking about the South, the wounded children. But before I do that, Judd, you can go on and, well, I guess you can leave it up because everybody's still over to the side. That's all right. Yeah. But I want to just say a couple of things about subpersonalities before we talk about them individually. And all of us have subpersonalities. You know, it's an unavoidable aspect of being a human, right? We get hurt by caregivers or by our culture or peer group or friends or our caretakers. And, you know, each of these four groupings of subpersonalities, each has their own distinct way of, you know, one, either protecting us from our harm or hurt, whether it be physical, emotional, or spiritual, but they also have a way of keeping us safe, right? Or to keep, or to get our needs met is what I was trying to say. One or the other, they're either protecting us or they figured out some way to get our needs met. And so they're very clever subpersonalities, right? They're very committed to us. And we'll talk about that some more, about the four different kind, like what are they, and what they're up to, and how to you know, get to know them and actually befriend them. So that's what we're going to talk more about today. But the goal, so here's another important overall thing, but the goal of self-healing here is to get to know these subpersonalities so well and to be able to respond to them from our four-faceted wholeness. Because what often happens with our subpersonalities is we become them and we see the world through them. Like, I'm the wounded child now. I'm hurt. I'm a victim. You know, that's the lens of what I see the world through. You know, this happens to all of us. You know, we get hijacked sometimes, right? But the work is to, like, be so resourced that I can stand in and not respond from that place, right? I can actually respond from my four-faceted wholeness and speak for that part of myself rather than speak from that part of myself, right? But until we get to know our subs, that's kind of hard to do, right? We have to resource ourselves, do some self-healing and some holding work to be able to do that.
Hey, Doug, can I jump in
Yeah,
and ask a question? Are
yeah,
these, would this model say that we all have these same subtypes, or are subtypes related to each of us differently? Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing the wounded child, which I think we could all recognize. You know, do we all have the loyal soldier as a subtype? Do we all have the escapist and addict? Or are some of those more pronounced in different individuals based upon their primary archetype, or archetypes that manifest them? Are these shadows of the gold, kind of repressed, or how do these? Yeah, what's
yeah.
your sense of that?
Yes to everything you said. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great question. Thank you. I'll just go on a tear, so help me rein it in with your questions. But yeah, I think so. Absolutely. All of us have aspects of all of these
hmm,
subs in us. Some of us more than others, I think. I think you're right. It's like some of us come in the world more skilled with a nurturing generative one, I think. And so we're not perhaps as wounded as others, or we're able to you know, care for ourselves better, perhaps, right? But yeah, I think it's definitely we all have a mixture of all of them, but again, some of us have them more than others,
yeah,
and they can all be in the shadow. You know, like, we could be not even be aware of any of these, but they're true about us, right? Because that's what the shadow is. It's true about me, but I don't know it. So until we get to know it, right, it's in the shadow.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and I was
yeah.
thinking that it looks like some of these may be shadow selves that also go with life stage transitions. So, you know,
Mm.
there are different archetypes that come on at different times in our life, but there may be as well the shadows of those as well that get manifested at different stages in life. And I was also holding that up with Carolyn Meese's work around the, you know, your 12 archetypes and your archetypical wheel.
Mm.
And you know, she talks about that we all have different archetypes, but we have 12 primary ones in our archetypical wheel, and she includes the wounded child and the prostitute and
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think she says there's 4 that we all have, and then there's 8 others that we're kind of born with, or that are cultivated because that's what evolution is doing at that moment. It needs to energize certain archetypes in our psyche, both for life stage transitions as well as for uh, helping us bring evolution forward, because these archetypes are needed not just for the individual but for the
Mm,
collective.
mm.
So yeah, I'm just kind of comparing and contrasting models and thoughts about archetypes or shadow personalities.
Yeah, I like that. That's really interesting, Judd. And different models, right, have different, and it's endlessly fascinating, isn't it? All the
Yeah,
different ones that you run into, and it makes, I'm so curious. I want to learn about that, and
there,
you know, definitely this whole model is you know, leans on Jungian
yeah,
thinking, and you know, definitely he was about archetypes and the way they come together uniquely for each person. And we're all like a thumbprint and a snowflake. We're all different. Like what got imprinted on us, you could say, when we came into time, right? And like you said, it opens up endless philosophical and you know, the meaning of life, right? Questions about like all of that that definitely are so interesting. Because I think we are all unique and have our own unique stardust, our own unique song to sing in the world. And perhaps soul sees to it that you're crushed in just the right way and you have just the right caregivers. I don't know for sure about that, but I wonder about that
yeah.
sometimes, you know,
No,
kind
it
of
is.
like what you were saying,
Yeah,
that I get crushed just in the right way so that at some point I'm not too overly hardened for my
yeah,
entire life, that you know, I'll actually take a view behind the veil, and I get pierced so I can see behind the veil,
yeah.
right?
When I was thinking that work, or some folks that have done work with these archetypes, like the king, the
Warrior,
gold is the
magician.
king, and the shadow of it is the tyrant, which is
Mm,
many what people are talking about with President Trump. You know, the gold of it that people see is the king, but the other side of it, the unhealthy, the wounded, the dark side of the king is the tyrant.
mm,
And
mm.
so I wonder about those as well. But and then there's the books
Right.
of gods in every man and goddesses in every woman, that was done, that looked at the Greek gods as the archetypes, and asking different questions about ones that we manifest there that have their own shadow and light
Mm,
manifestations.
mm.
Anyway,
Oh,
thank
wow.
you. Yeah, this is a love it.
We'll have to go have coffee and talk more about it.
Yes.
You have a whole plethora of resources there I'm curious about. Yeah, excellent. Yeah.
Well, keep going. I
Well,
think I kept you from the wounded child, so I don't want
no, I
to do
think you
that.
did great. Thank you. That was excellent, Judd. Yeah. So yeah, we'll just dive right in, and I'm going to talk about each of these 4, but after I talk about one, I'm going to open it up for questions, because that, I think that'll be, I'll try not to say too much about them because your questions may be more interesting. Um, but yeah, in the South here, the wounded children live here. And again, all of us have wounded children within us. You know, we all, you know, get crushed in some way. We get hurt, abandoned, rejected, uh, etc. Right? When we're young, all during our life, but especially young, you know, none of our caregivers are perfect. No system is perfect, right? And so, you know, in that getting hurt, there's a part of us that's prone to feeling angry, or you know, maybe ashamed, maybe sad or hurt, humiliated, embarrassed, right? And that part of us doesn't know how to deal with that when we're really young. It's difficult for a young psyche to deal with stuff, right? These challenging situations. And so again, that part of us is prone to feeling hurt, and is also prone to acting out of that wounded place, right? And you could say immature or impulsive ways, right? You know, and so we might do things that are very emotionally laden. Like we might make a scene to get what we want. We might use anger. Uh, we might be passive aggressive because see, like when I was 3 years old, I didn't know how to ask for my needs directly, right? I had to figure out other ways to do that. And if you're hurt about something on top of that, it adds fuel to that, right? And so for me, it's really important to get to know these wounded parts because will act in life as if it's natural to do this. I mean, I remember being a teenager and even in my 20s, well, sure, this is how you get your needs met. You be passive aggressive or you get controlling or whatever it is, right? So until you get to know it, you will transmit it, as Richard Rohr said. What's unhealed in you gets transmitted.
I love
So that
what Carl Jung says about that when at trauma, different places are in our life, especially in childhood, that the personality goes into the unconscious at that age and then no longer matures. And so when it
right,
comes back out, it's going to come back out at that age of trauma because it hasn't been brought
absolutely.
into the light of consciousness and therefore doesn't mature along with the other personality. And that's when we hook them, oh my gosh, you're like, oh my God, there's a 6-year-old boy in here. Like where did he come from? And it's interesting. You said yours came out as passive aggressive. Me not getting my needs met or knowing how to get my needs met came out as the trickster. So, right. They were the same, maybe a same dynamic, but the way in which, what got formed there in me was the trickster.
Like sarcasm or what?
Or, the charmer.
Oh, okay.
That
Yeah.
how I trick or manipulate other people to get my needs met without actually asking, to get my needs met. So that's the way it comes out for me as the trickster. He learned to be charming, a lot like Hermes did. He was very charming, and he can get away with a lot as a way of getting his needs met.
I have that one too. I've been told I'm charming. In part,
You are charming, Doug.
Thank you. Your charmer and my charmer
You're charming each other. Yes.
But too, for me though, I was terrified of abandonment, and I had no self-esteem when I was younger, and so I was terrified of being judged or humiliated or confronted or abandoned or somebody's anger. And so what I learned was to be very nice and friendly when I was younger. I overdeveloped a sense of a little boy in me at the expense of a more assertive side, right? And kind of a doormat, brown noser. What do you need? I'm a chameleon. I'll give it to you so you won't abandon me, right? So it's good to know like who the 5-year-old is in you. What are the authentic needs that one needed? And go back. I help people to go back and reparent themselves.
Yeah.
So go back to meet the 5-year-old boy, to love on and not outcast him. See, her Bill's got the outcast, and not outcast him anymore, not numb him out, not reject him, not berate him, not shame him into hiding, which is what we do. I'll talk about these other that are in cahoots with this one and how that dynamic works. But yeah, we want to go back and spend time with them with our 4-faceted wholeness, because there's where the real healing happens. When I step in with my 4-faceted wholeness and love on that one, go back and say, I get why you felt that way. And I want to encourage you now to have all your emotions. And I'm going to hold space for you. And reparent that one and then love, give that one what they didn't get. So they can relax and let go of those coping strategies of like being too charming for me, right? Or too much of a brown noser or whatnot.
Doug, I got to share a story because this came up last night. I had this dream last night and I was processing it with a friend this morning walking. And the image was of, in the dream, was of a woman that was, I think kind of a symbol for my animus. And I was in this conversation with her. It was kind of an argument, and I was pushing her on this one issue. And And she regressed into talking like a little child and like a baby, using a baby voice. And then she became kind of hysterical in this conversation that I was having with her. And what I realized is that I feel like that was and then I started having this conversation with her. I started coaching her. I was like, no, use your adult voice, become more rational, use your adult voice, and then we can have this conversation. I was kind of coaching, and I feel like it was my young animus that was needing to get expressed as my mature animus, and that I became aware of this real wounded feminine within me that I haven't really been in touch with before.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And so in this dream, there was this kind of coaxing or coaching my immature animus into more of her female voice, her powerful voice. But that was really interesting that my animus showed up, and which I think feels pretty wounded, and she felt pretty wounded and shamed, and was needing to come into her own voice. So anyway, I wanted to echo that, because as you were talking about that came up for me this morning. So
that's really juicy. I love that. And maybe anima as opposed to animus.
I'm sorry. Yes, my
maybe
anima.
But I think men can have male.
Well, right. That's true too. This was my anima. Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. And with that dream, I'd be real curious about transitioning over to her and seeing you from her eyes, her point of view too, to be curious.
Yeah. Well, I did do some of that work, and she felt shamed instead of embraced by me. And that's why, and then what came out of that, I mean, here I keep going, but what came out of that was the question of who is my mature anima and where is her voice? And so how do I make, my anima, how do I make space for my mature anima to speak? Was kind of what I ended up with. And how not to shame, but to gently but firmly be with my wounded anima, my younger girl, in a nurturing way rather than in a shameful way.
Right. Yeah. Oh wow, there's so many directions.
I know we could go on and on, but anyway, I wanted to give an example of what you're talking about there, I think.
But that's where this goes with this work I do with people. We go into all these kinds of conversations and these images that come up in dream work, right? In guided imagery and in active imagination, etc. It opens up these kinds of conversations, and like my work's all about getting, into a deeper relationship with the dream figures. And just like you did, seeing their perspective, and then for yours, I'd be curious about who in you learned to shame that part of you, and what are the roots of that, right? And to track that back, cultural, male, maybe in your family, etc., right? And to rebuild that relationship between a healthy masculine and this wounded feminine, right? Just as much as you said, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Just a couple more things about the wounded children. Bill talks about there's 5 or 4 basic archetypes. There's several wounded children, but there's 4 that he mentions. And one is the conformist. This is probably the largest wounding in the Western world. You could say the self-animating path to follow your own muse or your own soul is blocked in this world. You should go get a job, make money, become a lawyer and a doctor, put away such childish things, right? And be this. We want you to be this. And I'm perhaps over dramatizing that, but you get my point. And so you know, it's kind of like, don't follow that, do what we want you to be, conform. And a part of us knows, well, you know, if I don't do that, you know, then I won't get the rewards, I won't get the security, the comfort, etc. So I better do what they want me to be, or I'm outcast, right? This is, in this bill, calls the fearful insider. I'm afraid of being abandoned if I don't follow, if I don't become what everybody else is doing, follow the Joneses, right? Then I'll just cover the other three real quick. Then there's the victim, which is the fearful outsider. This one, uh, uh, you know, is motivated by fear of abandonment. They don't know how to get their needs met. They present themselves as unlucky. I can't do it. They're trying to get somebody else to do it for them. And again, the fearful insider. And these people, you could say, match up well with like what we call the loyal soldiers, the ones that are sort of taking care of everybody but themselves. So it's a good match right there when those two hook up. Then there's the rebel, the angry rebel. This is the angry outsider. This is the one that sometimes catches all the shadow in the family, and they're angry about what's come to them, and they don't feel like they're entitled or able to be part of, you know, the family system or the culture or whatever. And so part of their strategy is to reject everything. I'm not going to be like any of you, so I'm done with you. I'm checking out. And they're you know, angry about that, and they're inclined towards things like coercion, aggression, and that kind of thing. The thing is so interesting about them, though, is often what they do is they still conform to a bunch of other outside rebels. So they're still kind of conforming in another way. They're just like the conformists. They don't really know who they are, but they're reacting to the way things are. Like the conformist says, I'll be what you want me to be. The rebel says, I won't be. So they define themselves in that way, right? It's not really, well, who am I really? See, so 180 from sick is still sick, right? In a way. And then the last one I want to touch on is the, you know, the prince or princess. And this is the angry insider. I've done everything you all wanted me to. I gave up all my dreams to run the company business. I became that lawyer that you wanted me to become, Mom. And you know, now I'm going to get mine, and I'm going to get it in spades. So this I think of as kind of like the, you know, the greedy robber baron or greedy capitalist, that kind of thing. So those are generally the four. Hey, and I'm wondering, everybody turned off their video. You know, I hate to put you on the spot, but boy, it sure be see faces that I'm talking to. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. So with that, I'd love to just open up for questions about the wounded selves, the archetype of the wounded one. If you have any questions about that.
Or any examples in your own life of, you know, how
Right.
the wounded one has shown up for you.
Right. Yeah, something short too. If you have something short, keep it on the short end.
I'll say a little bit. I'm sort of, I'm more that a chameleon, sort of, I go along, get along, easy. I have no idea what I really feel or want because it depends on what other people want. I think there's some wonderful strengths in, you know, being flexible. I mean, but to the degree that I have a hard time asking for money for my work. What's that about? So I don't know. I'm just, it's like, oh, something's going on here.
Way. Yeah. And like you said, it could be a multitude of truths colliding. You're right. Of what's real, what's in there, right? And it's almost like, to me, it would be like to unpack that and get real conscious of all the voices that are coming into that. Kind of, you name several, right? And it's kind of like opening that up. Yeah.
There's another question I like around the wounded child, to ask people where, when they can get in touch with their wounded child, where the self keeps the wounded child in the house of the self. Like
Mm,
where is the wounded child kept? And that's one
mm,
of those body questions that
mm,
I think is really an important question, because we can get in touch. Where did the wounded child go in the body,
mm,
and
mm,
stay and listen to the body there. I think that's really, and when you get into often to, massage work, or, a lot of Reiki work, I think energy work, um, the place of energy disbalance, my experience has been it's often at the place where the wounded child is kept in the
mm,
body.
mhm.
Um, so that's
I
just an interesting question to ask. Yeah.
I'm with you on that, Judd. Yeah, it is. It's a fabulous question because, they get the wounded children get outcast, but they still live in the body. And sometimes what we tend to do is to numb them or shame them outside of our awareness, or harsh critics of them, whatever it takes to sort of silence them, whatever it takes. And you're right, body work, because the body knows the whole story. Body work will help you if you can't get there, or if you experience a lot of trauma, PTSD, you seeing somebody who can do body work with you and hold space is really important. But yeah, I also do what I call body inquiry work with people, where wherever you're holding energy in you, historically, or even in a moment, right, in your life, like I'm feeling pain here, I've been feeling heaviness in my heart, I can guide people in, and almost like a dream, like, well, what's there? What do you see? What color? What dreams and memories and emotion? And it's like Hakomi. In seconds, you can get to like people's core wounding with that. In seconds, you can, because the words will come out that'll identify that. Yeah, because not all therapy can be, you could say, or healing and holding work needs to be verbal. Sometimes it's in the body, and you got to move it. I do a lot of body work and movement and yoga and getting people out on the land in their bodies, etc. So somatic work is really important. Yeah. But any other comments or questions about the wounded ones? And let me just throw out here too, real quick. I do self-healing and holding work with people, but it's in service to a larger thing. And we've already sort of alluded to that it's in service to living the largest soul infused conversation into the world that I can live. That often my wounded parts keep me from, or the lack of wholeness keeps me from. I wouldn't even do healing and holding work. I'm more interested in the soul work. I mean, I'm equally interested in the healing and holding work, but slightly more in the soul work, like about like, what am I here? What am I called to do? And how can I be in conversation? But again, the fragmented part, the subpersonalities will hijack or stop that. And so anyways, I do a lot of self-healing and holding work with people because of that. Living soul, as Joanna Macy said, living soul into the world, you'll be visited by terror on a regular basis on some level. Yeah. To living that truthfully is what she said. Yeah. So if nothing else, I'll jump on to the north part of this. This is juicy, okay? because there's a real strong relationship between the north and the south subpersonality. So when we get wounded early in our life, there's an intrapsychic part of us that comes on the scene. And this is what we call the loyal soldier or loyal soldiers. And this is the part of us that says, oh, I'm getting hurt here. I got to stop this. What do I need to do to stop this? Outside of our awareness, see, at 3 or 4 or 5 years old, you're not thinking this, not consciously, but something else in us is, right? Some other intrapsychic part of us. And so this one in us comes up with some very, very, very extremely clever coping strategies. Again, that are designed to protect us or to get our needs met, right? And they're very committed. They're very stubborn, but they really do love us. And they're trying their darndest to protect us. And the number one way that they operate is through an inner critic. Harsh inner critic. I mean, brutal sometimes inner critic that will, they have a whole host of punitive mantras or a whole host of dramatic fear stories or a whole host of superstitious beliefs, or a whole host of restrictive self-talk. And they're brutal. It's brutal. Like, don't do that. You're stupid. I told you not to do that. What are you doing again, speaking that? Don't do that. They don't care what you think, right? You're gonna humiliate yourself. They're gonna find out you don't really know what you're talking about. You better take care of everybody else around you, because you're just going to get us abandoned by speaking out your truth or your anger or following that silly muse or that, that violin or dancing. That's silly stuff, right? You should be doing all this over here. And so this is the one that psycho-spiritually downsizes us to fit in our systems, right? This is the one that allows us to fit in, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because if you don't fit in, you could get abandoned. You really could. You could get constantly humiliated or beat up verbally. You could get unloved. You might even get thrown out of the house, right? So something comes on the scene and you want a couple more things, and you want to love this one. Because often people's first reaction is, I'm going to get rid of that awful part of me. I hate that part of me that talks to me like that. Well, that won't work. You want to actually love on that one. Know when they came on the scene at 3, 4, or 5 years old and why it was necessary. Give them some really great examples of why it was necessary for that part of you to run those coping strategies. And then thank them and love them. There's a whole lot more I could say about that, but I'll pause there and open it up for question, or Judd, if you've got something.
I was just connecting. I really appreciated a lot of Enneagram work goes back to this as the original knot of the personality around which, so it's the original trauma, and then it's the protective part of the psyche that brings on board whatever these mechanisms are to keep it safe, or to function in society, or to get love, or whatever it feels like it's doing. And that really does become the core knot around which personality then gets formed. And so I think the ability to go back into where did that person or that archetype or that caricature in us get formed, and as you say, just to love it, because it came on in a very important need. The challenge is that often we grow out of that situation and we don't need it anymore, but it's the only one that's there. And
Right.
that's where neurosis happens, is where it doesn't allow for other pieces of the self to come on because it's just locked down into that role. And often the lockdown is related to the degree of trauma that it formed around. And then see that, like, and when you said the magician or the magical thinking, and that's kind of an OCD, often you can trace down OCD behaviors to this child that did ritualistic behaviors in order to try to control reality. And if you can love that child, then sometimes those ritualistic behaviors you realize aren't needed.
Mm-hmm.
But you, instead of trying to shame the one that has OCD or don't do that, or medicate you in
Right.
order that you won't have those obsessive thoughts, right? But the idea is actually, can you love that piece of yourself that came into being in a very important role to help you survive and to thrive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of guilt and shame it, to love it and understand what it was doing. And then often neurosis can be relieved at that point instead of having to medicate it or something like that.
Totally. You're exactly right. And that part of us won't relax until it knows you've got your wholeness voice bigger. It'll finally say kind of, oh, okay, I can relax now. There's something else guiding the ship here. Of course, it's a real tussle because that one, like I said earlier, is committed and stubborn and won't let go without a good fight. Right. And sometimes we'll up the ammo and come up with a new strategy. Right. When you start to get on to them, you start sniffing out work with them, they'll come up with another strat. Oh, he's catching on to me. Still don't trust him. Right. I'm going to come up with another strat. And you'll believe it too. Yeah, you're darn right. I should just forget this, following this soul and this wholeness stuff. This is a ridiculous notion. I forget that. And you'll believe it for a while. But then finally, your wholeness hopefully will come back around and say, oh, that's just another strategy that this one. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's another opportunity to love on that one. And to tell them that the war is over. This is the critical piece. Tell them that and give them examples of why you now have the inner and outer resources that you didn't have when you were 3 or 4 years old. Right? That is very helpful for the loyal soldier to hear that and give them examples or her why it was necessary for them to do what they did. Right? And the war is over if the worst thing that your loyal soldier could think of happens. Do you have the inner and outer resources to hold yourself still? Not mean it won't be easy, but if you can still hold yourself, like for me, the worst thing would be speaking in front of 1,500 people and me say a bunch of gibberish and then get laughed at. That would be about the most humiliating thing. Now, 5-10 years ago, that would have been devastating. Now I think I could actually laugh too.
So Doug,
if the one last thing, if the war isn't over, you need to do a lot of healing and holding work with me, or go and see a psychotherapist for some intense healing and holding work. Yeah.
so for me, Doug, if I might step in here for a moment,
Yeah.
I think what's been most important to me when I'm discovering that loyal soldier and that inner critic, which I definitely recognize, is to realize that we were doing it for our, as Judd said, literally our survival.
Mm-hmm.
If we didn't do that, the fear is that we would actually lose our parents and we would die, because that's the animal nature of us that is there as 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 3-year-olds, infants, whatever it is, up until we're adults and capable of taking care of ourselves. To me, that's been so important to just realize that we were all children once, and we all had this
Beautiful. Yeah.
need to conform to whatever the situation was in our family, our parents in particular, our siblings, and our culture, in order to literally live. Because if our parents abandon us, that would be it, die.
And you speak, that beautifully speaks to the coming to our subs with the compassion of our wholeness, and holding them with that, just with that kind of understanding, and like, oh, oh gosh, I get this, why you're here. Thank you. I mean, here comes to that other piece. Thank you. And, you know, on your knees one day weeping because you get how much they've saved you. And then ultimately a big, huge, loving ceremony of gratitude for them.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Might I add something else here too, Doug? That you're talking about all this stuff being stored in the body. Of course, you know, that is certainly true. The modalities, not only of haikomi and various body works, massage and craniosacral work, but also the modalities of dance and drumming and
yoga,
music, and yoga and art.
Mm-hmm.
When done with a self-awareness, you know, a self-abandon to start with, but as things come up with self-awareness, it's really the awareness of all of this that's important. It's not whether this stuff is here, because it's here. It's in me. I can relate to all of this.
I know, you know, you and I have done these with all of our programs together, right? Body, art, and soul.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about the art, that's right. The beautiful thing about the art to me is that when adults can get free of saying, I can't do art, I can't draw, when we free them up, that what happens is that pre-verbal self, the child that actually didn't know how to talk yet, is there with the symbols of dreams and fantasies that then can be discovered in the artwork. And even it's, you know, doing artwork also does a more subtle healing of things that we may not even be aware of. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Beautiful. Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Any other questions or comments about the loyal soldiers? Because then we'll move on to the escapist addicts. Okay, so going west on this model, I'm sorry, east, Bill has the escapist and the addicts. On the outside of this wheel is the innocent sage, fool, and trickster. This is the wholeness. This part of us is really attracted to the upper world, the transcendence, you know, connecting to the one, merging with the one, the light, embodying spirit, you could say. But the sub-personality of this, the escapist addict, this sub-personality's favorite form of protection is evasion. And I'll come back to the wholeness part in a minute. But this part, their favorite form of protection is evasion. And they do it through addiction, numbing out, confusion, delinquency, running away. I have a strong escapist in me. And what it is, it's like, I can't cope with this. This is too much for my little mind, my heart. I can't, this is too painful. And so, you know, if the loyal soldiers or the wounded ones aren't enough to, you know, have their strategies don't protect us or get our needs met, you could say that the escapist addict will step in. It's kind of like the ace in the pocket. Like, we'll just numb out now. Again, it's too painful. And the escapist favorite form is addiction. And we all know lots of addicts in our lives, right? Addiction is huge, and there's, you know, rampant heroin addiction now, and, you know, downers, sleeping, and that kind of thing right now. But addiction is rampant, I think, in Western consumer culture. And I think our whole consumeristic lifestyle is addiction laden. And, you know, the thing about the addict is not only is it like trying to numb out or distract, but I think the addict's also reaching for what the East wholeness of us knows. That part of us that's attracted to the upper world, to merging with the one, the transcendent, you know, in once legitimate forms of that. And if it doesn't get it, if it doesn't have a culture or a family, you know, or elders or healthy adults around them to show them how to do that, they'll grab onto whatever they can get. Like for me, I remember the first time smoking marijuana. It was like, I had found nirvana. Wow, my parents never told me about this, right? But I was really looking for that kind of, you know, union in meditation and prayer, and I didn't get that growing up. So yeah, it's a reaching for something, not just numbing out. There's also this in the East is what Bill calls the prince or the princess. I'm sorry, the bliss head. And this could be the, you know, the one who's excessively into euphoria of the upper world, right? At the expense, nothing wrong with that. I love the upper world. I love hanging out there. But if it's at the expense of responsibility or feeling or, you know, troubling transformations, etc., then you want to question it. You know, is this just another form of escape, right? And then Bill also talks about the puer and the puella. This is the one in us that doesn't know how to grow up, wants to grow up, doesn't want to grow up, kind of the eternal child. And this is kind of like the American dream. It's kind of like once one fabulous adventure after another great vacation, another great movie holiday, as the world around us burns, right? It's that Peter Pan or that Wendy that lives in us. So those are just real briefly East personalities.
Yeah, this is where my stuff is. My stuff rests here. This is
Yeah.
Enneagram 7, you know, and for me, authentic transcendent experience that comes through the discipline of the ability to get there does fulfill this need in me, which, you know, otherwise it does come out in some form of it could come out in the form of alcohol or addiction or sex or any method that gets me to transcendence. You know, and this is my real in the lack of moving to secular communities that don't have a disciplined spiritual practice to connect them to the transcendence. I think that's why we're seeing all this drug addiction, because they don't have authentic, disciplined ways of moving towards those blissful spaces, which are real and beautiful and important spaces. But the addict becomes, without the discipline, then the quick fix becomes the only way they know how to get there. And I think that's why spiritual practice, whether it be meditation, yoga, will get you to a similar place. Like, you know, most crazy blissful experiences I've had have been through meditation and oneness rather than through what other people can get by taking mushrooms or doing some kind of drug. But the discipline to get there is what becomes the grounding piece to it. And that's what I think we in our culture really need to work at, because we don't have sacred communities anymore, or we're losing sacred communities. Yeah.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head for me. Most of our pathology and our difficulty is that we don't have a village.
Yeah.
We don't have a village to hold us. The village used to hold us. Now we're all in our own little homes, off in our own little worlds, and you're on your own. You got to shoulder all of this. And that's why I think in many ways we have all these practices and depth psychology and, you know, all these other modalities, et cetera, right? Kind of to make up for the village not being there. But I think if we can get back to the garden, back to the village, the support of that, you know, a lot of this pathology, I think, will just melt away, right? We can get back to that. Not that it'll always, I'm not talking about a perfect world. We'll never have that, right? But it's the problem. And we don't have rites of passage, meaningful ones, hardly any. We don't have community. So like my work at Animus, what we're interested in is where can rites of passages go for the next 100 years? And like, how do you move from one stage, you know, like we talked about in the soul-centered development, well, how can we move one stage at a time into wholeness, and into our life stages, all the way over into elderhood, right?
Yeah.
And if we don't, because we don't have all of that, we're prey to addictions.
Yeah.
And escapist stuff.
And that's what James Hillman is talking a lot about right now. He's like, that psychoanalysts and counseling has got to realize that it's interdependent with cultural, creating structures and culture. It's not just about sitting across from somebody and going into their work and thinking they're going to get healed. If you send them back out into a culture that's completely devoid of the communal supports or these structures of ritual and rites of passage, then the individual psyche, of course, is going to have neurosis. And so that psychologists and the whole psychological counseling world has got to partner with social transformation. We can't just separate those things. We've got to do community psychology, in other words, and figure out how the structures of healing.
And so, like much about what you and I are about, Judd, here's where we connect, is in soul-centric community again, or eco-centric community, not just ego-centric.
Yeah,
you know?
Right.
And like, how can we build these cultures that are rooted in soul now, rooted in earth wisdom now, right?
Yeah,
coming home to our own inner wilderness and the outer wilderness. I think these are two most trustworthy guides now: inner soul and outer wilderness, the outer nature. Two of our most trustworthy guides anyways are these two. Yeah. We didn't, how about any questions on the East? Anybody, or comments? Carl, good to see you. Glad you joined us.
Yeah, sorry to be late. Couldn't get on earlier, but I'm glad to catch the conversation now.
Great, great. So does anybody have any questions or comments about the East? If not, we'll move west.
Quick question. Could you quickly lay out why these directions? I mean, the East is where light comes from, is emergence. Is there some kind of wisdom built into the four directions that way?
There is, yeah. Like in the East, the sun rises, and a kind of innocence comes alive in the psyche, in each day, in each season. Spring, the beginning, fresh in from the other world of innocence and spirit, right? And as the sun goes up, I can see the big picture, right? And then I'll just do this quickly. And then moving south, it's sun's at its zenith, it's summer. The fruit on our trees of indigenosity and wildness and sensuality and passion are ripening. And in the west, the sun sets down. It's the end of another period of light. It's dark now. The sun's descending, going down. Psychospiritually, we need to descend too, not just up to the light, which is, we're top heavy now, right? Descend down into the dark, the unknown, the unconscious, where dreams and deep imagery, where our muse and our beloveds live, deep in our own psyche. And it's dusk, it's mysterious, right? This is the part of our psyche that guides us to soul. Like in the East, those are the part of our psyche that guide us to, you could say, upper world, the one. Here in the West, we're descending down to our own unique journey, our own, unique story, meaning, right? And then in the North, the sun is dark, it's winter, and a kind of fortitude is needed. And tending to self and others, taking care, storing food. It's a time of gestating, and spring's coming, and we'll come back out in the spring with our gifts and our way of being in the world. So it's kind of going around the wheel. But that's it, kind of loosely. Thanks for doing that, Rhodey. That's important, for asking that. Yeah. So how about shadow now? This is one of my favorite subjects. The shadow. The shadow selves. And this is a term that Jung came up with. to talk about what's in our own unconscious. It's true about me, but I don't know it's true. Or I would adamantly deny it's true. Right? I'm not that. Don't accuse me of that. But it's true about me. So anything and everything on this model can be in the shadow. All of our wholeness, all of our wounded parts, soul, spirit, the center, what we call it animus, the 3D aware ego, that can be in the shadow. And most of the work, in fact, all of the work I do is shadow work. I'm helping people to recover what's in the shadow. And we long to recover that. Part of us longs for that. And that's generally where the demand for growth comes, is out of the shadow, from a dream, an emotion, an image, a symbol, a metaphor, a story that's got our attention, a memory, all kinds of stuff. Sometimes it erupts out, right? And so my work is, very much shadow west work of bringing out of the shadow what's true for you and what's longing to be lived. The couple more things, the ego, you could say, rejects those things as not me. It either sees it as beneath me, negative, or it sees it as above me, out of reach. Oh, I could never be that. Like a positive shadow onto somebody. Or the negative would be, I am not that lustful, carnal person. Oh, that is not me. That's disgusting, right? So shadow work is very, very yummy. And, who was it? Robert Bly said that about 80% of us at 20 years old in this culture gets lopped off and stuck in the shadow. The loyal soldier is the one that does it. That's the intrapsychic part of us that says, oh, that's too dangerous. We're going to get rid of that too. So the whole south of most of us gets put in the shadow. The sensual, enchanted, erotic, sexual one, the one who can sing in public, the one who doesn't care about nudity, all kinds of the passion and creativity. So much of it all gets that. And he said, and maybe it was Robert Johnson said, the most spiritual work you can do is shadow work. That's the most important work that any of us can do right now, is shadow work. It's coming into contact with our wholeness, because you can't have a healthy culture. You can't have a healthy interaction with the other side of the aisle if you don't have your wholeness on board. And I think we're seeing on the larger scale, we're just seeing a lot of wounded parts battling it out from our politicians, both sides of the aisle, I think. A lot of wounded parts battling it out for, oh, no, it's you. You're the problem over there. And the other side, oh, no, it's you, right? We need our wholeness, right? And to know about our sub-personalities, right? If we want to be in a conversation. So we can't have a healthy culture if we don't have healthy individuals, right? Yeah. So that's a couple of things about shadow. And Judd, I know you love this topic.
Oh, I just so agree. That's the work. And not only individually, but collectively. The collective shadow is what I think we're addressing right now in Louisville, is that we shadowed the injustice and the inequality that was happening because we were shining too much light on compassionate Louisville. So I think we're just experiencing our own wholeness speaking to us out of the shadow. And it was shadowed because we weren't addressing it, right? We were saying we were the most compassionate city in the world. And then, 2 years later or 10 years later, we became the center for focus on inequity, right? So it's our wholeness. And that's the beauty of what I think our Black community is offering us, is our future wholeness is coming into more clarity because our light and our shadow become clear. And I think Louisville in several years is going to be an amazing place because we're being forced to do our shadow work, right? Thanks be to, the spirit or the soul. It's making us confront that. So yeah, individual shadow work and collective shadow work.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think even like on a large scale, like, you know, to see somebody as disturbing, you know, and so much power, to me, kind of the question to ask is, what did I do to contribute to that? Not just blame it on those people over there. It's like, that is our collective shadow, and I had something to do with that. And to me, to point the finger at all those people is actually damaging.
Yeah.
It's really say, what did I do to contribute to that? Because then I can connect with those people on a more honest level that I'm trying to reach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Projection and shadow are two of the same psychic dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
So we shadow it and then we project it. And so pulling back projection is really key. Doug,
Right.
we're going to have to begin to close down. I've got a 4:15. So,
Okay.
this has been so rich. I mean, of course, it's always rich, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
A deep bow to you, and for raising these conversations, putting it in language we can have conversation about. So we've got another one that will come up in the first or second week in December. I hope you'll come back and join us, and then we'll see what's up for 2021. Doug, I hope maybe we can figure some way to keep doing the work. So
I'm loving it. So thank you so much for all your support all these years, my friend.
yeah, well, and vice versa for what a rich group of people we've got on the call today too. So
thank you all, everyone. Thank you.
A real deep bow. And from Bulgaria, right? Thanks for joining us all the way from Bulgaria, right? It's a transcontinental conversation today. So good to have you with us, Galina. Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
too.
you
I'm
all.
sorry I missed the last part, but I had an emergency with my little one and I had to miss the last part.
Tend to the wounded child, right? I mean, we all have to do that literally and symbolically. So, well, Doug, a deep bow to you. And for those that have been watching us, thanks for joining us. And we'll share more information on nature-based soul work going forward. Thanks for joining us.
And there's a video of this too you'll put out, right?
Yeah, we'll have the video up on our both Facebook page and on our web page and YouTube page. So you can look for it there if you want to share it.
Great.
Thank you all. Peace.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.